Stephanie White grabbing Caitlyn Clark by the arm. Caitlyn Clark saying, "Get your hands off me." Briann January grabbing Caitlyn Clark. Caitlyn Clark saying, "Get your hands off me." Folks, do you know what I see when I look at the Indiana Fever? I see the Mean Girls.
Stop what you are doing right now. Before you scroll past this, before you dismiss this as just another Sports Takes video, I need you to actually sit with what is happening inside the Indiana Fever organization right now. Because what is unfolding in real time, on camera, in front of millions of people, is one of the most fascinating, most complicated, and most consequential stories in women's sports history. We are talking about Caitlyn Clark, the most transformative athlete women's basketball has ever seen, getting into visible, documented, undeniable confrontations with her coaching staff. Not once, not in a fluke moment of competitive frustration, twice in the same game. On the same night she broke a WNBA record. Let that sink in for a moment. The woman who dragged women's basketball into the mainstream cultural conversation, the player whose name sells out arenas and crashes streaming servers, was sitting on a bench in Indiana moving seats to get away from one of her own coaches. That is not a footnote. That is a headline. And today we are going to break down every layer of it, every angle, every uncomfortable truth, because this story deserves more than hot takes and clipped moments on social media. This is simply explained. And we do not lie to you here. Let us start with the night everything became impossible to ignore. May 17th, 2026. Indiana Fever versus the Seattle Storm. The Fever win convincingly, 89-78. Caitlyn Clark puts up 21 points and 10 assists, and in doing so, she etches her name deeper into the record books by setting a new WNBA record for the most career games with at least 20 points and 10 assists, surpassing the previous standard set by the legendary Courtney Vandersloot. By any measure, this is a triumphant night. This is a celebration. This is the kind of performance that should have every person in that building feeling unified, energized, and grateful to be witnessing something historic. Instead, a fan's phone captures something that tells a completely different story. First, there is an exchange with head coach Stephanie White, a visible emotional disagreement over positioning and defensive coverage, happening right there on the bench for anyone with a camera to see. Then later in the same game, assistant coach Briann January approaches Clark, walking her through a defensive sequence, explaining assignments, doing exactly what assistant coaches are paid to do. And Clark, who has never in her entire competitive life been the type to nod quietly and move on, makes it crystal clear that she disagrees. The conversation intensifies. Clark responds emotionally, and then she gets up and physically moves to a different seat on the bench. She relocated, mid-game. Away from her coach. Now some people will tell you that is nothing. That is just competitive fire. That is just the heat of the moment. And I will hear that argument, but I will also tell you this. You do not have two separate on-bench confrontations with two different members of your coaching staff in one game, during a game you are winning if everything behind the scenes is harmonious. That is not competitive fire misfiring once. That is a pattern revealing itself under pressure. To fully understand what happened on May 17th, you have to go back 2 days earlier to Friday, May 15th. Indiana hosts the Washington Mystics. The game goes to overtime. Through 3 quarters, the Fever are trailing by 9 points, the kind of deficit that breaks teams, the kind of moment that exposes who your real leaders are. And then Caitlyn Clark happened. In the 4th quarter alone, Clark scored 17 of Indiana's 31 points. She hit 5 3-pointers in that final period. 5. When the game was slipping away, when her team needed someone to step into the fire, she did not just step in. She set the whole court ablaze. She dragged her team back from 9 down, forced overtime, and gave Indiana every chance to win that basketball game. She finished with 32 points, 8 assists, and 4 rebounds. They still lost, 104-102, and that hurt. What happened at the post-game podium is what sent the internet into overdrive. A reporter asked Stephanie White a direct, specific question about Caitlyn Clark's 4th quarter performance, about the woman who had just single-handedly kept their season alive. And White chose not to acknowledge her star player by name. She pivoted to team language, collective effort, the group, the system. She did not say her name. The reaction was immediate and it was fierce. Social media flooded with frustration. Fans who had watched Clark pour everything she had into that 4th quarter, who had sat there watching her will her team back into a game they should have already lost, could not understand how the coach of that team could stand at a podium and talk around the most direct question of the night. One comment that circulated widely captured the sentiment bluntly. The fans were watching someone try to answer like Greg Popovich, but coach like someone who has not figured out what kind of coach she actually is yet. Now, is that entirely fair to Stephanie White? Maybe not entirely, but it speaks to something real. Because great coaches, the ones who build dynasties and earn lifelong loyalty, they understand the difference between promoting the system and celebrating their stars. Pop celebrated Tim Duncan. Phil Jackson let Kobe and Shaq be exactly who they were. Pat Riley built championships around the best players in the building and made sure those players knew it. When your coaching philosophy prevents you from giving a genuine, direct, emotional answer about your franchise player's historic performance after the most specific question of the press conference, something is not connecting. And the fans felt it. Now let us bring Briann January fully into this conversation, because she is not a minor character in this story, and she deserves the full picture. January is a former WNBA champion. She has earned everything on her coaching resume through competitive excellence at the highest level. She handles the Fever's defensive responsibilities, and by most accounts, her relationship with Clark has not been defined by hostility. Clark reposted January's content on her Instagram story earlier this year, both of them sharing a lighthearted moment around January running defensive drills with kids in London. There is mutual respect there. There is real history, but history and friction can coexist. And what makes the recent bench confrontation between Clark and January particularly interesting is that it did not arrive without warning signs. Go back to September 2025, WNBA playoffs. Clark is sidelined with injury, watching from the bench during Indiana's first-round series against the Atlanta Dream. Video surfaces of Clark and teammate Sophie Cunningham completely disregarding January's repeated attempts to get them seated and calm. January motions, they stay standing. January tries again. They keep going. Multiple attempts, and Clark and Cunningham continue challenging the referees with zero acknowledgement of the coaching staff's requests. At the time, a lot of Clark's fan base found it charming. Bench mob energy. The competitive spirit of a player who cannot turn it off even when she is injured. And there is something to that reading. But there is another reading. A WNBA champion, a professional coach with serious credentials, being publicly disregarded by the players she is trying to manage in front of a national television audience multiple times in one sequence. That does not disappear. That plants something. And what gets planted in September sometimes blooms in May. Here is the part of this story that I think is the most honest and the most important. I do not believe Stephanie White is trying to sabotage Caitlyn Clark. I do not think this is personal vendetta energy. I do not think anyone in that organization is waking up every morning with the intention of making Clark's professional life harder. What I believe this is, at its core, is a fundamental and unresolved philosophical disagreement about basketball. Stephanie White is a system coach. She believes in defensive principles, collective responsibility, spreading the floor, and the decision-making across the roster. Those are legitimate coaching values. They have produced results. In 2025, without Clark for the majority of the season, White led the Fever to 24 wins, the most regular season victories in franchise history. Indiana won the Commissioner's Cup. They made the semifinals. You cannot take that away from her. But Caitlyn Clark is not a system piece. She is not a complementary player who fits neatly into a predetermined structure. She is a generational offensive force whose greatest value to any basketball team comes when the ball is in her hands. When she is operating as the primary initiator, when the entire offensive architecture is designed around her historic shooting range, her vision, and her ability to make every player around her dramatically better. Those two realities, White's system-first philosophy and Clark's optimal role as the undisputed engine of everything, have been pulling against each other since White arrived. Clark herself acknowledged her exhaustion with the subject when reporters pressed her about playing off the ball during practice sessions this season. Her response was sharp and pointed. She made it clear she was tired of being asked the same question repeatedly, which tells you everything about how unresolved the internal conversation around this topic actually is. When your star player is visibly frustrated answering media questions about her role, it means the answers have not been provided behind closed doors to her satisfaction. Here is something that adds genuine complexity to this narrative, and I want to give it its proper context. Just 2 months before the May bench confrontations, Caitlyn Clark and Stephanie White were working together in Puerto Rico during the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament. Clark led Team USA to a perfect 5-0 record. She averaged 11.6 points per game and led the entire tournament with 6.4 assists per game. She was named Tournament MVP. And Stephanie White was right there on the sideline as an assistant coach on that same staff. They won. Together, Clark was extraordinary. White helped run the operation. So whatever dynamic exists between them inside the Indiana Fever is not simply about two people who cannot stand each other. It is something more nuanced than that. It is a coach-player relationship that contains genuine warmth in certain contexts and genuine friction in others. The warmth shows up when White draws a technical foul going at the referees, and Clark erupts on the bench with pure joy, completely lit up, loving her coach's competitive fire in that moment. The friction shows up when the defensive assignments feel wrong and the press conference answers feel evasive, and the philosophical differences between system and star become impossible to hide under the bright lights of the regular season. That complexity does not make the problem smaller. It actually makes it harder to solve, because you cannot just declare the relationship broken and move on. There are real threads connecting these two people, but those threads are being tested by a set of circumstances that neither of them fully controls. Let us ground this in the statistical reality for a moment, because Caitlyn Clark in her third WNBA season is not just good. She is historically significant at a level the league has rarely witnessed. She is the fastest player in WNBA history to reach 1,000 career points combined with 250 rebounds and 250 assists. She is setting records for games with elite combined point and assist totals. She is the reason the Indiana Fever sold out arenas during her rookie season, and the reason the WNBA's television numbers climbed to levels the league had not seen before. Her season opener contributed a milestone, the basket that gave her 1,000 career WNBA points in a loss, a franchise milestone in a defeat. Indiana dropped to 1-2 through their first 3 games of 2026, not the championship trajectory the organization spent all offseason building toward in the public imagination. Numbers can tell you Clark is performing. Numbers cannot tell you why she moved seats on the bench during a game her team was winning. Numbers cannot capture the temperature of a high five that fans described as the most reluctant, most perfunctory, most frost-covered acknowledgement they had ever watched a player give a coach after hitting a signature shot. You feel what the numbers cannot measure. And right now, what people feel when they watch the Indiana Fever sideline is not a championship culture. It is a tension that has not been named out loud and therefore cannot be resolved. I'm not going to stand here and call for Stephanie White to be fired. I'm not going to tell Caitlyn Clark to demand a trade. Those are easy takes, and Street Hoops does not deal in easy takes. What I am going to say is this. The Indiana Fever organization, from the front office down to the coaching staff, needs to make a decision. A real decision. Not a diplomatic, both sides, everybody is doing great decision. A structural, philosophical, organizational commitment that Caitlyn Clark is the engine of this franchise and everything else. The defensive schemes, the rotation patterns, the offensive sequencing, the press conference language, all of it is built to maximize what she brings to the court every single night. That commitment has not been made clearly, and until it is, the friction will keep surfacing. On the bench, at the podium, in viral clips that give the internet new material every 72 hours. Great coaches do not manage their best players. They liberate them. They build environments where excellence is the expectation and celebration is the instinct. When Caitlyn Clark scores 17 points in a fourth quarter to bring her team back from 9 down, the coach standing at the podium afterward should not need to think about how to answer a direct question. The words should come naturally, because genuine pride does not require careful management. The Fever have the most valuable asset in women's professional basketball right now. They have a fully healthy Caitlyn Clark in her third season, with a complete understanding of the league, a sharpened skill set, a hunger to win that has only intensified through injury and comeback, and a historical profile that puts her in conversations reserved for the very best players this sport has ever produced. Wasting that asset in unresolved tension, in philosophical standoffs, in bench confrontations that become Twitter moments instead of championship fuel, would be one of the most avoidable tragedies in recent sports history. Here is where we land on all of this. The Indiana Fever story in 2026 is not a simple story. It is not good coach versus bad player or loyal star versus ungrateful franchise. It is a complicated, high-pressure, high-stakes collision between a coaching philosophy and a generational talent, playing out under the most scrutinized spotlight in women's sports in real time, for millions of people watching on every available screen. The bench confrontations are real. The press conference tension is real. The cold body language is real. The philosophical disagreement over how to use the most talented offensive player in the league is real, and the clock is ticking. Caitlyn Clark did not come back from injury, did not spend an offseason sharpening every part of her game, did not go to Puerto Rico and win a qualifying tournament MVP, to spend her third WNBA season moving seats on the bench and giving reluctant high fives after step-back threes that deserve standing ovations. She came back to win. The question the Indiana Fever organization needs to answer urgently behind closed doors, with real honesty and zero diplomatic softening, is whether the current setup gives her the best possible chance to do exactly that. Because if the answer is no, and right now the bench footage is making a pretty compelling argument, then Indiana is not just wasting a season. They are wasting something that comes along once in a lifetime. Figure it out, Indiana. The whole world is watching. This is Simply Explained. We never lie to you. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Is this situation fixable before the All-Star break, or does it explode first? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because when this story moves, and it will move, you want to be here when it does. See you next time.